6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I fallen.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely
Ready?
I can move you. Making review. Making review.
Say 6,
6,
5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Rank and Review listeners. You have found your way to episode 110 of Rank and Review. In this episode, my old friend Malcolm Wilkinson returns from my past to discuss classic thrills. I don't think Malcolm and I have had a conversation this long since the late 90s. So it was really great to catch up with him, someone else who's really into the theater. And I like that he chose a different list, a challenge for both of us. It's interesting to speak on films, some of which were made 30, 40 years before I was born. I don't have the same context that I usually do. Most of the films I review for the podcast have been made, at least in my lifetime, or close enough to it. So I hope you're into a brave new area of review for Rank and Review. And I hope you have some feedback to give me, because if you do, you should send feedback to ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. Please check out the website at ranknreview.ca, and please tell that other movie fan in your life about the podcast, because they'd probably enjoy it, wouldn't they? As usual, I would like to warn my listeners that I do have spoilers for the films being reviewed, as well as coarse language throughout the podcast. I am your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons, and I do hope you enjoy episode 110 of Rank and Review. Classic Thrills. La la la. I have Malcolm Wilkinson. I'm saying that right?
You're saying that right, Larry
Malcolm
Parsons.
Wilkinson in my basement. I have a terrible habit of inviting guests to my house and then mispronouncing their names.
Okay. Wilkinson's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's true, but you never know. Sometimes they'll surprise you.
The thing that you said that I was in your basement, that might be...
He'd just been hiding here waiting for his turn at Rank and Review, and here it comes in episode 110.
147 days later in his basement.
Malcolm, I mean, you have a special place in my heart because the first stage play that I ever wrote that was produced, Malcolm starred in. Mm-hmm. Back in, I want to say, 1997?
Something like that. It was, yeah.
Somewhere in the 1900s.
Yeah. Jason Marshall and I playing Grant and Hugh.
That's right. Two versions of myself, basically.
Yeah.
And it's very much like a first play. It really feels that way if I look back on it now. But it sort of speaks of a precious time in my life. And even then, I hope you don't mind me saying, I remember thinking that Malcolm kind of feels like an old soul to me. I don't know what that's about.
No, that's fine.
That's how I felt. And then when we reconnected, you emailed me and you said you discovered the podcast and wanted to give it a try. I was like, great. And then you said you wanted to do classic thrills, these older, classic films.
Older genres, yeah.
And it's a little bit of a blind spot for me. Most of my focus have been movies that have been made basically while I'm alive. Mm-hmm. There are some classics that we've hit on this show, but for the most part, I'm kind of a modern cineast. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit challenging for me in a way. I mean, it's great. I like to get some film history in me, but
Sure.
As far as me being able to speak about all of the day players in the movie and to sort of speak about what happened before, what happened after. The context is a little bit lost on me.
Right. Fair enough. No, that's fair. No, I mean, when I emailed you, I mean, I'd mentioned like Hitchcock was one of my go-tos to watch.
Right.
Anytime he's on Turner Classics,
Any Hitchcock will do you?
Yeah, anyone. I mean, most people, I mean, when you defer to like favorite Hitchcocks, a lot of people go to Psycho Psycho's his most popular,
right.
I think his most commercial successful film. But I always, Strangers on a Train to me is just by far his most brilliant film. Right. Obviously, the modern day version would be Throw Mama from the Train with Billy Crystal and
right.
Danny DeVito, which was a more comedic version. This wasn't a comedy, but just a brilliant, simple premise, but just about two guys on a train and what happens if we crisscross, as Robert Walker would say.
And I think Hitchcock was good for this. What we're going to see in a lot of these movies is films that are sort of based off of plays, or that in some ways feel like plays.
Lifeboat was a play, I think, and he had another play called Rope, about the dinner party where there was a body hidden in a crate, and these two gentlemen one was feeling very guilty, and the other one was very cocky about killing this person, and they had this body in a crate at a dinner party, and the food was draped on the table and that, and Jimmy Stewart, who was their college professor, figured everything out.
Right. Pulled the string.
Yeah, basically.
Well, on the podcast, all the Hitchcock we've done so far have been the two big stalwarts, Psycho and The Birds, both of which I like.
Oh yeah, no, both are great.
But he made a ton of movies.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, especially in this sort of box context, things like Lifeboat is a really specific example of it. But I think if you do have what's essentially a two-handed scene between two actors in one room, as a play, that's riveting. As a film, you need a really good director.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this whole stationary camera where it just sort of feels like a filmed play.
Right.
I mean, maybe once upon a time that was riveting, but I think the modern audience needs a little bit more.
Oh, they do.
So I'm going to be running into that a little bit. I mean, I'll be judging the movies, about how much I like them, and B, about how well they did for their time.
Sure. Yeah.
Right,
exactly.
Is there anything you wanted to say by way of introduction before I listed off these 6 classic thrills we're going to review?
I don't think there's anything. We can just go for it, if you like. Whatever order you prefer.
I really appreciate you being here, Malcolm.
I appreciate doing it.
It's cool to see you.
I can't even remember how I ran into the... I mean, you know, with the internet nowadays, you look at one thing and then one thing leads you to another and so on and so on and so forth. I can't even remember how I ran into your podcast.
You just did a search of Larry Parsons' nude pics?
That could be it. And rank and review. Yeah.
That's just a guess.
Don't make me rank you nude.
The 6 classic thrills we're going to look at White Zombie from 1932, Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat from 1944. We're going to look at The Bad Seed from 1956, A Bucket of Blood from 1959, the 1962 version of Cape Fear, and we'll close it out with the 1967 adaptation of the stage play, Wait Until Dark.
Yeah.
Good enough?
That's good enough with me.
Keep it. You may change your mind.
Not dead? Are you mad? I saw her die. The doctor signed a certificate. I saw them bury her.
Captive in the borderland between life and death. Her brain drained of the life spark. The white zombie obeys the unholy commands of her demon master. As mindless creatures carry out his cursed will, terror explodes in horror and heartquake.
Zombie! Allez, allez!
Never eyes so evil, never powers so potent, never magic so black. Bela Dracula Lugosi, as the master of the White Zombie.
So there's some significant stuff to be said about White Zombie in that it is considered to be the first feature-length zombie film
Right.
ever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a little bit different in that it's not like a zombie film like we would picture today. When we're talking about zombies here, we're not talking about the reanimated dead eating people, trying to eat their brains, rip them from limb. The horror in this type of zombie, sort of Haitian voodoo zombie, is the loss of identity and the creating of somebody into a willing slave, I guess.
Right, which is what Bela Lugosi was doing in that.
Yes, his entire plantation, his entire was a sugarcane mill,
Yeah.
was being run by zombies. A lot of them former competitors of his that he has put this whammy on.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going in here expecting a version of Night of the Living Dead, right away I will steer you in another direction.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's not like that at all.
The other thing, because it's 1932, we're really at the dawn of feature films. It's like a 70-minute movie. And a lot of the actors, again, are being cast off of the stage or being cast off of the street. So you'll have this weird sort of swing between the big acting, which is playing for the back of the room, like a live theater actor would do.
Exactly.
And the sort of shell-shocked, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been on a camera before.
Right.
And between those two, there is a real artifice to climb over to get into White Zombie. So I guess to start, I will ask, were you able to get into it? Or was 1932 a little bit too much of a hurdle?
No, I don't. No, I can get into the older classic movies. It's fine. I mean, White Zombie itself was just, it just seemed very, very, what would be the word? I guess, obviously they were probably low budget, but it just seemed like a lot of those movies back then, it wouldn't be surprising if you looked at Bela Lugosi's credits, say between 1931 to 33, if he had like 10 movies. Because they shot movies quite quickly.
They'll do half a dozen movies in a year, no problem.
Yeah, it's like it wasn't a big deal. So, I mean, you're putting these together really quickly, really cheaply, and you want to get them in the theater. I mean, I think the 1950s, they had a lot of those as well, because that was really the big alien sci-fi horror.
The studio system used to basically be just keep churning it out.
Yeah.
You know, just keep. If you're a filmmaker and you've only made one movie in a year, as far as I'm concerned, in the golden age of Hollywood, you're a part timer. You're not legit, right?
No, you're.
And again, as actors, especially if they have a studio contract, they'll be doing movies they don't even want to do because the studio says you're doing White Zombie.
It would almost be a dream for an actor because you'd be constantly working.
Constantly working, constantly different part, and not necessarily always the parts that were right for you. So
no,
it might stretch your game. It might hit you a little bit too. Right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, Bela Lugosi. I think. He found once he did Dracula the year before in '31. I think they suddenly found out. Okay.
Well, he's early version Vincent Price, right? He's one of these guys that they can attach to the horror genre and help sell tickets. Right. I don't know what the ancillary to that in the modern age is. Like, he's maybe a Bruce Campbell or a Jeffrey Combs type figure.
But Bruce Campbell's in on the joke.
He's in on the joke, too, yeah. But, I mean, as far as a figure that they would put in a horror movie to help sell the horror movie to the horror crowd, right? Bela Lugosi would be a name draw at this time.
Yeah, and Boris Karloff.
Absolutely.
And Lon Chaney, those three.
Lon Chaney would really be your money's worth with those makeup.
Yeah.
But when we come down to White Zombie, it's basically a love triangle. It turns into a quadruple triangle, right? Everybody's in love with this chick, Madeline, which I was going to ask you about. What is the appeal of Madeline?
I don't know. It was like 85 years ago, man. I don't know.
But yes, her husband brings her to Haiti. He meets this business partner who's instantly smitten with her. The business partner approaches the Bela Lugosi character, who's ominously named Murder Legendre.
Murder Legendre.
Legendre, yeah. The Haitian name. But Murder is literally his first name.
Murder's his first name.
And of course, the evil voodoo priest turns out to be less than honest as well. And he himself decides that he can use his zombie powers to enslave these men and claim Madeline for himself.
Right.
So, who is Madeline going to end up with, and how is this evil going to be overcome? I was not chewing my nails.
I wasn't either. No, I kept looking. Part of it for me, I just kept looking at it from a sort of a filmmaker's point of view, because I'd done a little bit of filmmaking in that too, and it was put together not very well. Like you said, it was it's kind of an early medium. Not so early. Chaplin had been doing movies since the early teens, but early 10s, whatever you want to call it. But it just really, whoever, I can't remember who the director was, but it wasn't really put together very well. And it just seemed like it was something to, let's get it out, let's put some butts in the seats, and let's see what we can sell.
I appreciated, I'm going to be terrible with these names here. I don't know if this character's going to be properly. I'm looking at IMDb, but the black guy who sort of does the wagon up to the main plantation or the sugarcane site and gives us the exposition about the zombie culture, I thought was
the
kind
coach
of...
driver, yeah, I got his name.
He just credited as the coach driver? Okay.
Coach driver, Clarence Muse was his name.
I think it was interesting, at the time, having a black character that was giving you teaching the white characters something in of itself, I think would probably be a little bit rare.
Yeah.
And that it was incredibly appropriate. This is his island. He knows, where everybody lives, and he knows who to be nervous about and who not to be.
Right.
And I think that was pretty progressive in this movie. I think when we talk about Lifeboat, there's a black character in that movie, and he fought to have more to do and say in that movie, and was kind of sort of patted down. And that was a few years later,
Right.
So, as far as the technical filmmaking, you're right. I don't think this movie was really storyboarded. I think there's wide shots and there's close shots, and then there's wide shots and then there's close shots.
I mean, there's probably more movies that are like that than there are, say a film that is shot like Dracula or Frankenstein that had more studio money behind it. Yeah. I think a lot more of these films were probably, let's get this done in like 6 days and make the next one.
But I will say it doesn't feel like a filmed play. We have several locations, fairly credible exterior locations, and a cliffside finale in which all of the right people fall off the cliff.
Yeah. They just seem to keep walking, keep going.
I like these zombies as an idea, and I think that there's an opportunity for real satire, or social sort of satire, making a statement about, I guess, the willing slave, which is the ultimate goal of this corporate figure, this sugarcane operator. He just wants employees that won't complain, won't get paid, and will just do their jobs.
Right.
And the average citizen who gets corrupted by Mr. Murder loses their identity to become one of these willing slaves.
Right.
In a way, it's almost more relevant today to go back to the Haitian voodoo loss of identity zombies. We're all obsessed with the Walking Dead Romero tear your flesh from your bones zombies. Right. And I'm a fan, don't get me wrong. I like zombie cinema. But I think that there'd be something to be said for going back to the voodoo, the serpent and the rainbow type of storyline, where there's these literal powders that will make people look as if they're dead and essentially chemically lobotomize people.
Right.
I think that there's genuine opportunity for real horror there. Just maybe not in a movie made in 1932.
Well, yeah, possibly. I mean, make it more of a thriller as opposed to just, I'm not a big fan of the zombie genre like today, but right. I think, I can see what you're saying. I mean, you could make it more, in terms of a thriller, more of a thinking man's zombie as opposed to just Walking Dead, blood and guts
And like I've said in previous episodes, it's like zombies can be whatever you want. Dracula, sex and violence. Mm-hmm. Frankenstein, the folly of science. Mm-hmm. Zombies, you put whatever social ill you want on them. Yeah. AIDS, overpopulation, loss of identity, like I said.
Working for Trump.
That's right, absolutely.
They're all
Trump
zombies.
voter,
Yeah, anything that's relevant today.
Anything that will shake you out of your personality and make you do things that you wouldn't otherwise do willingly.
Exactly.
So, maybe remake White Zombie. Honestly, I sit here saying I don't regret watching White Zombie, but would I recommend it?
This version of White Zombie, yeah. I don't think I would recommend it, but you've opened my eyes a little bit as to maybe make it more of a social commentary. If you remade it, I wouldn't recommend making it shot for shot like they did. Gus Van Sant did Psycho, but regrettably. But
I wish you could hear me rolling my eyes.
I can see it. You guys out there can't see it. He was rolling his eyes. We did it simultaneously. But no, if they did do something, maybe they could make a contemporary version, less with effect, and I think more with story behind it. Because I think a lot of movies nowadays, especially all these Marvel comic movies that come out, it's just they're just relying on CGI, and it's just you're not watching a movie.
Well, I mean, it's sort of reliant on the prettiness, like you said, the special effects, the spectacle, and the story is kind of secondary after a point.
Right.
You're there to see the Hulk fight Thor, and everything else just sort of comes with it.
Right.
I think there's zombie aficionados out there. If you want to see the first zombie movie ever made, that's historically significant for us genre fans. But as an average viewer, looking at a movie from the 30s, I have to believe there's better options for you.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed?
Yeah, so very much agreed.
You fools! Stop thinking about yourselves! Think of the boat! Joe, take the sheet, make it fast! Come on! Man the pump! The rest of you bail!
So one of the many benefits of being Alfred Hitchcock is that you get your every whim kind of serviced.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of setting a movie in a lifeboat with a bunch of English and American, abandoned people floating in the ocean who have to deal with each other, and then this
Shot down by the Germans.
Shot down by the Germans. They have to deal with each other, and then they have to deal with this new passenger who may well be one of the people responsible for putting them in the lifeboat.
Yeah. Well, he was the
the U-boat captain, as
the
we
U-boat
eventually
captain.
find out.
We do find out, yes.
So we get all these people together in a boat, and how are they going to interact with each other? And more challenging, how is Hitchcock going to keep this dynamic for 90 minutes when we're locked into this one location? Literally for the whole movie.
The whole movie's there, yeah.
We are never not in that lifeboat from lights up on the picture. So he had this idea, and he thought, well, who can I get to write it? Well, my first couple of choices, Ernest Hemingway said no. So the big name, though, the recent Oscar winner was already on a project, so he had to settle with John Steinbeck.
Not a bad choice.
John Steinbeck, who was uncomfortable with writing screenplays, would write a novella of Lifeboat, which would then in turn be adapted by a screenwriter into what we see here.
Mm-hmm.
And Steinbeck was so unhappy with the adaptation that he wanted to take his name off of it, but the studio and Hitchcock agreed having Steinbeck's name on the poster would help to sell it, so he had to live with that.
Right.
The actual novella was never published.
It wasn't.
As far as I know, at least not in any of his, maybe in some of his collected works, but none of his official releases while he was out there. I don't know if it was because he was unhappy with it, or if it was just that he didn't want to associate himself with the Hollywood project, or if it was, quote, lesser Steinbeck.
Right.
But as far as, how are we going to deal with each other, and can they keep their shit together? It's a desperate situation.
It is a very desperate situation. They kept trying to, for the first little bit, they kept trying to designate a captain.
Yeah.
Well, I have more nautical experience. Well, I'm John Hodiak, so I'm the handsome one. I should be captain. But really, it was actually Tallulah Bankhead who seemed to be the one to.
She was taking point.
Yeah, she was taking point. She had, so to speak, she had the balls of the film.
Yeah.
And she did in real life, I think, too.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Apparently, she was a handful.
Mm-hmm.
But to be fair, so was Hitchcock.
Oh, yeah.
This is sort of the era where almost any whim would be greeted, in Hollywood as far as the creative process.
Mm-hmm.
Tallulah Bankhead was this diva character, again hired from the stage. But if everything wasn't just show, she would have a little tantrum, get out of my light and la 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 la.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that mentality has always rubbed me the wrong way, like dealing with it personally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the guy who built this set might be the best at shaping door frames of anyone in the world, but he doesn't feel the need to be a shithead about it to everyone, right? He doesn't feel the need to throw a tantrum if he's being distracted by a noise going on in the next room,
Mm-hmm.
So this thing that Tallulah and Hitchcock have, I don't respect that aspect of their personality, but I do respect that they back it up, because I think she's awesome in the movie.
She is, yeah.
Like, I might not want to have a glass of wine with her, but I will watch her in a movie.
Right. Well, it's the same thing as Faye Dunaway and Roman Polanski on Chinatown.
Absolutely.
To get sidetracked. They butted heads. I was going to say batted heads. Probably the same thing. But
And both arguably kind of terrible people, but brilliant artists.
Yeah. I mean, they got into a fight over, I think, some 2 strands of hair on her head.
Right.
And it almost came to blows. But Chinatown turned out to be one of the best movies of the 70s.
Yeah, it seems to be warmly received.
Yeah.
I was surprised by the darkness of the movie. In a lot of ways. Like, I mean, you don't expect a mother and a baby to be pulled on board the lifeboat and the baby to have already been drowned.
No, you don't.
I didn't see that one coming.
No, I didn't at all.
And the fact that they had to basically try to tie her to the lifeboat to stop her from drowning herself, and even that proves to be unsuccessful.
No, she found a way.
Yeah.
If you really, I guess, want to find a way, you'll do it.
A determined individual will do that. But I guess, again, I wasn't expecting that level of darkness, because this movie was so old. They didn't deal with death and darkness in the 50s.
Yeah, well, 1944, no.
Well, of course they did.
Yeah.
I think the context is important of how fresh the war is in the minds of everybody.
It was still going on.
Yeah, and how interesting it was that there was a kind of initial backlash against the film when it came out, because they thought that the film was way too soft on the German character. I find fascinating, because I don't think they're soft on the German character at all.
No.
But critics were saying this movie has 3 days to get out of town type of thing, you know, that it's some sort of propaganda piece against the war. And watching it through today's eyes doesn't feel that way at all. It feels like kind of a meditation on war and what it can make of people. And they gave the villain dimension. You'd sort of expect almost a cartoon Nazi figure who's just everything he does and says is evil, whose eyes are sort of cocked and crooked and played really big. And in a way, that's what the audience wanted at that time.
Well, he looked more, Walter Slezak was the guy, that was the actor. I mean, he looked more roly-poly, merry, frumpy when he first got on, and you didn't...
He seems almost warm until you see everything he does. Everything he does is a manipulation. And we're supposed to be we see it and they see it, and they're just trying to decide how to deal with it. It finally culminates in them pitching him off the boat, but what have we become? You know? And it's interesting that in the zeitgeist it was can we have that conversation? Of course you throw the Nazi off the boat. That's what we do.
Well, especially he's the one that's
he's responsible for their situation.
For the being there, yes.
Over and above the fact that he watches this guy going delirious from dehydration and drinking salt water while he himself has a flask of water in his chest. Right? That's how he's outed. He's the only one on the boat who is able to sweat anymore.
Right. And didn't if I remember, didn't Tallulah actually start speaking to him in
English?
Yeah, she spoke to him in English, and he... How did she do that? I can't even
Originally, he wasn't saying anything in English, and eventually it came out that clearly he could understand them, and then eventually he just started responding to them.
Yeah.
I sort of read that again as him trying to protect his own skin, right?
Well, of course. You have 10 of the people, or however many people that are...
Yeah.
will want to kill you.
That felt less so like a manipulation and more about self-preservation. But as far as directing them towards the German boat instead of the shores of Cuba they were trying to get to, and as far as him, convincing the wounded sailor to commit suicide to cover his own misdeeds. Yeah, he's a bad guy. He's a dimensioned, compelling villain. Yeah. And I think it's one of the strongest aspects of the movie. And it's interesting. Like I said, at the time it came out, it was considered its liability. Further to the darkness of the story, too, there's the fairly likable character, the guy who wants to go back to his girl and dance, who's suffered an injury to his leg, which, again, we don't see, but has clearly gone gangrene.
Yeah.
And they have to do this surgery on the boat. They cut off amputate his leg. And,
they get him loaded up on booze so he can not feel pain.
There's no way they could explore it as graphically as you would see it today.
No.
But, again, surprisingly ugly for the time.
And you watch. There's also probably about a 2-minute clip or a 90-second clip of him just going into complete delirium. Partly because they have been loading him up with boosts to
fight the pain.
Yeah, to fight the pain. Plus, I mean, if he's battling gangrene, I mean, it's his mental state is not.
Yeah. So when he says the German has water, people are not amenable to believing him right now.
No, they won't. No. Even though he's right.
Yeah, no, he happened to be completely on point for that one thing.
Yeah.
But he was able to be talked off the boat quite simply. The other character, Joe Spencer, is the only black character on the boat, played by his actor Canada Lee. Apparently, like I said, he wanted more to do and made a point of dropping a lot of the yes sirs and no sirs in the script.
That should be.
In his position in a survival situation, survival would trump status, and I completely find that credible too.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of interesting because he is certainly the person that we spend the least time getting to know on the boat.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And the biggest plot point we learn about him is what? He's really good at picking pockets.
Yeah.
It's kind of unfortunate, right?
Yeah, I forgot that part.
It's one of those things where you could sort of you kind of shrug and say it's a sign of the times. I guess it's cool that they included a black character in the movie, but if this was to be done again, I'd like more attention paid to that character. It's one of those things, either do something with the character or discard it.
There are people today, though, that still may make a movie and still might have, unfortunately make the black character the pickpocket, that kind of thing. They're probably still...
Just default.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate. I'm not saying the movie's outright racist. I mean, it's dealing with a lot of stuff at once. It's not about race, so it would be sort of maybe taking it down an errant path. But it's just unfortunate, and it's something that wouldn't happen in a modern film.
No.
Or for some reason, everybody in the boat would be black. Right? Yeah. It would just be like.
But I do think, like I said, I think there are still people that would probably make that mistake and do that. Still have the
and not think twice about it. Yeah.
No.
He grew up in the streets, so he knows crime.
Exactly.
It's in their head, it's not a racial issue or whatever.
No.
I found that interesting. This whole thing was shot in a tank. Well, obviously, they weren't shooting it in like the open ocean or anything like that. But I have to say, impressively mounted. I knew it was shot in a tank. I mean, no part of me believed that they were going to go shoot this on the open ocean.
No, but I mean, when you watch it, I mean, you believe that you're watching it in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I mean, it's like if you go to a play, if you think you're seeing a play, then obviously they haven't done it, or you have too critical an eye.
Yeah.
If you actually believe that you're in, say, watching, I believe I'm watching, Willie Loman's Backyard, watching Death of a Salesman.
Yeah.
Then you believe it. If you sit there and think you're watching a damn play, then the problem's on you as an audience member, or they haven't done their job.
And it doesn't feel like a play. Like, it's got that nature of a play where it's a bunch of actors locked into one location, dynamically shot.
Yeah.
You're a Hitchcock guy.
I like Hitchcock, yeah.
He finds a way to put himself as a cameo in every one of his films.
He does, yeah. He's in a newspaper ad. That the guy that got Graham Greene, William Bendix. He's looking at the paper and sees a photo of.
It's a pretty clever way to put himself into the movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what he did in all of his films. He just popped up quickly. I mean, I remember Oliver Stone used to pop up in all of his films in a speaking role.
Yeah.
Whether he was like a news reporter, or whether he was in the Doors, whether he was a film school professor, or whatever. I mean, Hitchcock is just there for one film. He's walking to, Colley's.
Yeah.
Another minute he's walking into a store with a cello.
Yeah.
Here's a newspaper ad.
Yeah, he tries to do it unobtrusively, but there's something about the man Hitchcock that he draws your eye. He's a strange-looking fellow.
Well, he's a very strange-looking fellow. Yeah.
The scale of the spectacle at the end, I think, was impressive for the day, and even watching it now. They see a boat rowing towards them, and they figure they're rescued, and then that boat gets exploded, and then the main ship that rescue boat had come, but it gets exploded, and shrapnel and water is raining down on everybody.
Right.
I gotta tell you, I believed it.
Oh, I completely believed it. Yeah, I bought that. I knew it was in a tank, but I completely bought that it was in the middle of the ocean.
And just none of the artifice of the performance. Like I said, there's sort of weird newsreel quality that some of the delivery seems to have from all the actors. Didn't take me out of it.
That was the way a lot of those.
That's how it was done.
That's how they spoke.
Yeah.
You watch Edward G. Robinson in, like, I think, what was it, Omega Man or something? Or not Omega Man. He did one towards the end of his Soylent Green with Charlton Heston, and he's speaking sort of very modern day. I mean, 1970s modern day. But if you watch him in 1930s in any gangster film, it's Edward G. Robinson. Here I am, talking like this really quickly. What do you think? Hey, Larry Parsons, put him up there.
Exactly. It almost feels like they're doing a bit, but that's just how it was done.
That's how it was done.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah, and you never see Edward G. Robinson and James Cagney they probably did the same movie. I'm just trying to make a joke. They sounded the same.
Hume Cronin, who played Stanley, Sparks Garrett. I actually recognized him. He's one of the old farts who was in, like, Cocoon.
Oh, yeah.
I knew Hume Cronin from, like, his later career, and I thought it was kind of cool seeing him as this young, handsome, supporting character.
Right. He was actually one of the, because there was another fellow on, I can't remember the actors, and there was one of the fellows, there was the James Hodiak, who wanted to be the captain. There was another one who had nautical experience, but then this Hume Cronin was actually the one who was sort of steering the boat toward
Cuba.
Yeah.
That
They
was
were
his
supposed
goal.
to-
Yeah.
That was his goal.
And,
Whether they were misguided or not by Walter Slezak, but he was still the one
trying to
physically
steer.
manning the boat. Yeah.
Yeah. And he also was in love with the other female character, the nurse that's on the boat, who doesn't have anything near as much to do, largely because Tallulah Blankhead insisted that she not have anything to do.
She didn't want competition.
She didn't want any competition,
No.
especially from another female actress.
Right.
Which, again, is really hard to respect. But she's a great character. She's a journalist, and she keeps on losing things, you know? When we first meet her, she's got this mink coat and this film camera, and even though she's the first person in this lifeboat and she's in a life or death situation, she seems confident that she's going to survive, and not only that, but that she's got this indelible historic footage.
Yeah, and a story to tell.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And first, her camera and her mink get stripped from her, and eventually her hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting the way she ends up draping herself over one of the men. I can't remember the name of that actor.
John Hodiak.
John Hodiak.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't know what the attraction is to that guy other than he is attractive.
Mm-hmm.
But that seems, and maybe this comes off as a little bit weak, to be her last gasp, is just to drape herself over him like a scarf and hope to be rescued.
Right. Yeah. Well, she, like you said, she's lost all hope, and she I think she lost her independence they'd all kind of lost some of their independence. I mean, if you're stranded in the middle of the ocean in a lifeboat, but I mean, she seemed to be more fierce, but then I guess when she gave up hope, then it was like, oh.
Yeah, that's the one that it hurt.
Yeah.
There's other people in the boat who have been in lifeboats before and said it took, I think, what did they say, 3 weeks in the open ocean before they found rescue.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, and it was a close thing.
But this wasn't her because
Yeah.
she was and journalists back then probably were living the glamorous
and
lifestyle.
just still, even though she's frontline war reporting, in her head, she'll be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's somehow got this invisible shield, and that realization that she has no invisible shield is cool for her character.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting thing that her character learns that I wonder if the actress herself ever could have.
I don't know if she did.
Anyway, overall, I'm a huge fan of Lifeboat, and it was one of the ones that was a newer Hitchcock to me. So I can say I'm familiar with a Hitchcock movie that's not The Birds. And
Yeah,
not
no,
Psycho.
I'm familiar with that, and I quite enjoyed it. I did.
It's worth your time.
Mm-hmm. It is worth your time, very much so.
Hugs.
I'll miss your hugs.
Well, I'm not letting the slightest degree really knows what she's told of you. Don't mind me being presumptuous. I had a long talk with that guard since I saw you last. And that was a long, interesting conversation. He said he saw Rhoda on the pier just before Claude was found among the pilings. She knows something, all right.
Did you have anything, I don't care how small it was, did you have anything to do with the way Claude got drowned?
What makes you ask that, Mother?
Now look me in the eye and tell me the truth, because I must know.
No, Mother, I didn't.
You're not going back to the Fern School next year. They don't want you anymore.
Okay.
I'm going to call Miss Fern and have her come over here.
You think I lied to her?
You did lie to her.
But not to you, Mother, not to you.
You know something? Miss Fern dyes her hair.
And Rhoda's a sweet, perfectly sound little girl.
Father, is she?
Granddaddy! Next to Daddy, you lift me up best. Why do you look at me?
I just want to see your face.
So, The Bad Seed is based off of a 1954 novel and play. True story from Larry's life. When I was a little kid, the Edmonton Fringe, I lived in a small town just outside of Edmonton, was like a mecca in the summer months. It's a really huge fringe. It's really well attended. You get global acts all over the place. And I was young. I was probably 12 or 13, and it was an adults-only show. And I don't know if my mom talked me in or she got the tickets and I just got into it anyway, but I got to see a production of The Bad Seed.
Okay.
And it's one of my younger, really strong theater memories. Because it's about a little girl who's a fucking serial killer. Right? And it was interesting how it was accomplished in the stage. We are told about brutal acts of violence. Like a boy is pushed off a dock, and when he tries to climb back on, he's beaten with tap shoes on his hands and head until he falls off the dock and drowns. None of it is seen, but the story is told so implicitly as to be horrifying. Same thing with the...
That makes it more horrifying, just the thought of it. When you actually see something, it's not as gory.
Yeah.
But when the thought of it, there are some, I mean, I'm getting off track, but I mean, there are some Twilight Zone episodes where things are just assumed.
Yeah.
Even as an adult, that can really scare the daylights out of me.
Your brain will scare you more than any vision or idea that the filmmakers will present to you. If they can get you to use your brain against yourself, they're going to scare you.
Because it's the anticipation or the not knowing what's going to happen.
And I think stage plays are really good at accomplishing that because by the nature of their being, they have a very narrow field in which to work on you.
Yeah.
So like in the play, when the farmhand gets set ablaze, he's off stage, but they hit the actors with a light off of the side of the stage that made you believe somebody was on fire.
Right.
It's interesting because the movie really does feel like a film version of the play. Like almost to a point where it's a criticism of the movie. Like they could have just stood the camera flatly and been filming a stage presentation at times.
Well, plus, I mean, I saw more of a film than I did. I mean, they used location more.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, I didn't see it as much.
You didn't, but
I didn't feel
felt
that.
the Act 1, Act 2 sort of feel of the movie, and at the end they do a literal curtain call with everybody.
That bothered me because I mean, you're supposed to dislike you're supposed to have a feeling with that. That's one thing I have a problem with. And I know a lot of films, I think, did that back in the years. You're supposed to have like a definite feeling about these characters. When you see the little girl come out and do the little curtsy, I think her name's Patty McCormick, it's like, I don't want to applaud or clap for you. I mean, you convinced me that you're a little evil sociopath. Yeah. But I mean, I didn't, Patty McCormick, and they bring them all out. No, I didn't. No. And plus the fact, like, some of you died. I mean, you shouldn't be taking a curtain call.
I'm of two minds of it. I don't as a rule like it unless you're working in the world of artifice, like in the Royal Tannenbaums when they do a cast call and show Gene Hackman as Royal Tannenbaum. That doesn't bother me because it's a whimsical world. In a thriller, don't do that. Don't do that. I also find it jarring, and I bumped into it in a lot of these movies too, how they front load the credits. You get like 4 minutes of credits at the beginning, and then you get the movie, and the movie ends. The end. Then like flip, the film is done.
Yeah.
I almost missed the credit scrolls to let you kind of like settle and adjust to the fact the story has been told.
Right.
Anyway, the film sticks to the play in that all of the violence is sort of not as implicitly shown. It's spoken of. The idea of this girl doing these terrible things is horrifying enough. We don't need to see it.
Because it's a little
girl.
Kid.
And again, if the movie was made today, we would see it. And I don't think it would be as good.
It wouldn't be as effective. No, it's like those 80s slasher films. You see Jason knifing someone, it isn't as effective. You know what's going on. It's right there.
The slasher movies have their place in the role. Like,
of course.
Whatever. But I mean, the visceral violence was not needed to make this scary.
No.
Especially considering in 1956, the idea of a homicidal child was just unbelievable.
Well, in and of itself, that itself is the horrifying part of the story.
Like, for the time, there's people, I think, would be rattled by it. So they didn't need to push it any further than they actually did.
No, and you didn't need to see what she was doing.
If I have a problem with the movie, it's that they compromised the ending. Okay? In the original story, in the original play, this movie culminates in an attempted murder-suicide between a mother and daughter. Okay, like again, I can't stress how fucking dark that is for 1950s, right? But originally, the mother successfully commits suicide, but the shot begins the attention of someone nearby, and they call an ambulance, and they're able to save the little girl, and she is put up for adoption.
So it's someone else's problem.
So evil goes on.
Yeah.
In this movie, they found it not only necessary for her to be killed off, but she is executed by the Lord God Almighty himself.
Exactly. Yeah.
She is struck by a bolt of lightning
On
from
the
the
dock.
clear blue sky on the dock where she committed her second murder, I guess, as it
When
turns
she's
out.
going, I think she was going back in the middle of the night
pendant?
to try and get the pendant.
Yeah. But I have a problem with the Deus Ex Machina endings generally. Like, when none of the characters do anything to solve the problem, it sort of seems anticlimactic. But how else could they do it? In that, if they weren't going to let her live through the movie, she had to be defeated. Does the dad kill the little girl? Does the mom kill the little girl? Does the little girl kill herself? Because none of those endings are acceptable.
No.
So God.
Well, the little girl wouldn't kill herself.
Right?
Yeah.
So God kills her. And I have to say, I'm a little mixed on that.
She was going to go, though. I mean, no parent would want to do that to their... No,
Of course not.
No sane parent would do that to their
No,
child.
it would break you completely.
Yeah.
But it would be compelling drama. Right?
Possibly, but they might not have they might not have got away with it. Wasn't there, getting sidetracked, wasn't there, I keep saying that word, sidetracked too, wasn't there a film back in the day where they wanted to, shed Macaulay Culkin's Home Alone little funny goofy kid, and
The Good Son,
and then the mother was holding, what was it, Elijah
Wood in one hand and her son in the other, and she has to choose to save one of them.
And she lets go of Macaulay.
Because she knows.
Well, she knows he's not,
And that's what I think is actually really done well in this movie. The mother knows that her daughter is crazy before all this shit goes down. I think she knows that she was involved in the death that happened to a previous neighbor, and I think she knows right away when they name the little kid that is drowned that her daughter had something to do with it. It's on her face.
Yeah.
And
even though she presents herself as the perfect little schoolgirl.
Yeah, well, and that's part of it.
So helpful.
Her mom knows that when her daughter is tap dancing, well, that's a bad move. When she's lying, right? She can tell.
So did the gardener. He had to say.
Sees right through her.
Yeah, he sees right through her, and he's the would be the typical. I'm the slow, dim-witted character. I'm the slow gardener, but I can tell she's bad news.
The gardener's flaw was that at the end of the day, even though he saw through her, he had no idea what he was dealing with. Right? When he threatened to tell on her and he showed her the burned shoes out of the incinerator, he was telling her to kill him. And she fucking did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, hard stuff. What's the name? I think the mother of the child who is drowned, who twice comes to the house to question the girl because...
Eileen Eckhart,
Yeah, she doesn't know that the girl has murdered her son, but she has this feeling like she knows more than she said. And I think maybe initially in her head she thinks that Rhoda, the bad seed of the movie, has been traumatized. Rhoda's not traumatizable.
No.
Right?
No, she's not.
But I think the performance that woman gives of this sort of misery, this drunken, desperate misery, is so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And that absolutely reads through today.
It does. Well, she also had the liquid courage in there, which helped her bring out... No one wants to hear that their kid is you might have murdered my son, your child is a sociopath.
Yeah.
So, I mean, no one wants to hear that, but she had enough of that liquid courage to
get it out.
Confront the mother about that. Is it bad that I'm rocking back and forth on this road? Okay. You don't need to edit that out. It'll be fine.
Yeah, no, rock away.
Okay.
So in the end, this sort of idea of the evil of a child will, like you said, we see it again and again in cinema. One thing that I think I would yank out of the movie is the discovery. Rhoda was adopted, and they discover that her father was this convicted super evil serial killer or some really bad dude. And the idea was that this evil was genetic. No matter how wholesome, no matter how good and sweet her upbringing, she was just going to be evil because she was hardwired to be evil. I find that I'd rather it was just inexplicable, like they didn't try to explain why she was evil, or, I'm not saying they should blame the parents and say that she was abused into it, but it's too easy that her daddy was a serial killer. You know what I mean?
I understand what you mean. I watch, I'll throw this out, I watch a lot of Law & Order SVU.
Sweet.
Yeah, I call it the Mariska Hargitay show. I had a crush on her. That's another sidebar.
Watch Ghoulies.
Ghoulies, yeah, that's her first movie. I've seen Ghoulies with that big 80s Mariska hair. Anyway, no, she, they always say on the show, because, I mean, she was the product of a father who raped the mother.
Right.
But, I mean, she turned out to be okay. I mean, she's a good cop in that. But, I mean, a lot of things that they discuss on that show is that this could be, it could be hereditary.
Right.
Yeah, this kind of, you know, I mean, we're talking about rape now, but I mean, that kind of behavior could be hereditary.
Right.
If the father was like that, then, you know, the son could end up growing up with that gene, that type of gene. And if the father's a sociopath in the bad seed, then could be that the daughter...
Maybe there is the evil gene. Maybe that thing even exists. For some reason, as a plot point, I did not welcome it here. I find it scarier that it's just an evil little girl, and that, like, as a mother, she would be even more deeply horrified that this Rhoda's half her. This is half her. Mm-hmm. And she's not even a teenager yet. And she is such a high-functioning sociopath that the only thing that will increase with time is her body count, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. No.
Bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, if she kept going, if she wasn't struck by lightning on that dock, no, she would have kept going. And she had everyone snowed. I mean, the mother to a point, that upstairs nosy landlady that kept coming down and bringing her gifts and earrings and everything. I mean, had her completely snowed, and I don't even think the kid would say thank you. She's an ungrateful sociopath too.
When I would talk to the top of the review about it, like feeling like a stage play, they basically took the cast from the stage play, and that's how they cast the movie. Right?
Oh, even the little girl?
Even the little girl.
Oh, wow.
So that might have been part of it too, knowing that they had done the scenes so many times before. It was a fairly popular show at the time, and controversial. Yeah. Watching it today, do you think that a modern audience will get thrills out of the bad seed?
Possibly, and hopefully you would have to. I mean, it wouldn't be in my top 6. Well, I mean, it's obviously in the 6, but I mean, it wasn't my favorite. But I mean, hopefully the audience today. I mean, I'd like to trust people, but and give them the benefit of the doubt. But I think a lot of people's attention spans, and I include myself in this, but the attention spans aren't there. They need some quick reason why this is going on. They can't wait the night. They want to know quickly why she is like this. Like you said, the explanation. Sometimes there isn't an explanation. My Law and Order SVU thing, that might not be an explanation. She just could be a bad kid just because
she's a bad kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could be the 2 great parents, and then somehow this one slips through the cracks.
I get how that feels less satisfying, but in a weird way it feels more honest to admit we don't have an answer here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, I don't. I mean, could it be done today? I think it could. It could be done. I would just hope that it would be done with in a more psychological, thrilling way, like you said, to turn your mind on yourself.
A little more complicated. Mm-hmm. In my mind, and again, I'm biased. I saw it as a stage production when I'm a kid. Mm-hmm. It just works as a stage play for me. Like, you get a really good actress to play that little girl, and you tell this story basically through the dialogue. No jump scares, no implicit violence.
No.
Utterly chilling.
Yeah. It's just implied. Mm-hmm.
The artist, the poet, the figure model who loves to show it.
Do you suppose he could be physically attracted to her?
No, man, he ain't the type. You don't get enough vitamin E.
All these are beat. All these you'll meet in A Bucket of Blood.
Let us make the scene. Crazy.
Come, enjoy yourself. Where the hilarious enjoy the horrifying in A Bucket of Blood.
No, you're gonna shoot me! Don't shoot!
Come to the land of living dreams, where realists dream of the unreal.
Walter, you've done something to me. Something deep down inside of my prana. Oh, Walter, I want to be with you. You're creative.
Beatniks at their bawdiest. The creative urge at its most primitive.
I'm deeply moved, and I shall compose a poem.
Love is art. Art is love. It's the weirdest and the wildest.
I don't want to make statues anymore. I want to get married.
to you.
Because this is a super professional podcast, I always like to reference The Simpsons.
Okay, that's fine. It's okay that I keep like going off and like mentioning something else.
Absolutely. It's free form.
Mm-hmm.
In The Simpsons, Ned Flanders, you know, the Christian neighbor,
Yep.
his parents are these like beatniks.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And Bucket of Blood kind of reminded me of, well, it's set in the beatnik generation, in a beatnik bar. And the main character, Walter Paisley, wants so much to be part of this beatnik environment. And I don't know if it's intentional in the movie Bucket of Blood, but it comes off like really toxic. Like, it doesn't seem like a bar I would want to hang out in. In fact, I feel sort of vaguely embarrassed for everybody there.
Right.
So, to start off talking about Bucket of Blood, Roger Corman's 1959, I guess, satirical horror movie. It's got a bit of a cult following around it. And my first question would be, do you think it deserves it?
I think so, absolutely. We're running right now.
We're running,
oh,
yeah.
okay, we're running. I didn't know we were running. No, it completely did. Actually, this was quite enjoyable and quite a unique premise. I mean, like you said, I mean, he's kind of a wannabe who wants to be inside there. He's a simple busboy. And then he suddenly starts making this cool art.
Yeah.
Little do they know what's in the sculptures that he's making. But, and then he's suddenly accepted into their world, and he becomes like the big hotshot.
Yeah. He also is awful, though. He also becomes awful. Like,
oh, yeah, very awful, yeah.
His success comes at the expense of his likability.
Because he's very likable, he is.
Audiences love a sad sack character going from rags to riches, right? They like seeing a guy go from the bottom to the top.
Right.
And a lot of times what happens in real life when you go to the bottom of the top is that it costs you so much that either you're not enjoying it at the top or that in the end you've lost who you were. And I definitely think that's here.
Well, no one else will like you at the top.
Yeah.
You might like yourself at the top, but no one else will.
Yeah. You're so far from who you were that was it worth it? It was interesting for me watching it. I liked the movie. I mean, I was amused by it, but when was it in this movie where my affection for Walter Paisley turned? It was pretty early, you know? You go from cheering for him, he wanted to at least impress the girl that he likes at the bar. But the idea of being accepted by these terrible, pretentious beatniks, it's such a sad desire in a lot of ways.
Well, it is. I mean, just when they at one point, it just reminded me of Brooklyn when they were at one point talking about like what they were having for breakfast, and all the guava and omelet and all this fancy food. It just reminded me of these Park Slope moms, the Park Slope Mafia, as they call it, stroller mafia. These mothers that would have these massive strollers take up the sidewalks. We call them the stroller mafia. And then you'd be at a restaurant, they would order these fancy, breakfasts and all these fruit and wonderful things. And then you watch them eat. People can't see this, but they'd watch it eat, and they'd have like this, and they're just screaming because they're eating all this food that they really don't want to eat. But it sounds good if the whole restaurant hears you order it. Yeah. And those beatniks actually.
Everybody has to know that you're really enjoying your pricey art house.
Yeah,
breakfast.
your egg white omelet. Exactly. And that's what these beatniks were doing.
To such a ridiculous, pretentious degree. There's one beatnik that we focus on in particular. When Walter is going to announce his new work, he says he's going to compose a poem for the occasion. And the poem is so brutal. It's so brutal.
Right.
Roger Corman produced this one, and famously it was done for $50,000. They used the same set that they would use to shoot Little Shop of Horrors.
Right,
and
yep.
It started his mentality of, if you can make a movie under a certain budget, you're just going to make a profit. You just are. Even if it's a lukewarm reception by the audiences because you spend so little on it, you're going to make money. And this was going to be very lucrative for him. He was going to use this formula for decades to come and produce and direct hundreds of movies. It's interesting, a little bit later in his career, he starts to actually spend some money when he does some of these Edgar Allan Poe adaptations with Peter Lorre and Vincent Price. Yeah. He starts to spend money on those because they're his features. But as a producer, dirt cheap.
Oh, yeah.
Right? hundreds of movies and dozens of great ones.
Yeah.
So, Dick Miller's got a lot of cult following from this. If you're a fan of Gremlins, he shows up in that movie.
Right.
The director of Gremlins uses him like a Lucky Charm in all of his films.
Who is that? Was that Joe
Dante?
Joe Dante, yeah.
I was blanking on his name.
I had never thought of who directed Gremlins. Yeah.
Check, like in The Howling, he's got a one-scene role in The Howling,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like almost all of his films. And even in the films where Dick Miller isn't in, it usually means they shot a scene with Dick Miller, but they ended up cutting it for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
He's sort of his good luck charm. And he even shows up in movies being referenced as Walter, or in sometimes Walter Paisley. And it's interesting to me because I'm just wondering why this performance and this character struck such a chord with people. Because, like I say, for me, I ran out of charm with Walter before like the halfway point of the movie.
Well, where did he lose it for you?
Well,
do you remember?
I think I haven't done a good job of the plot. Walter Paisley wants to be an artiste and fit in at this beatnik place, but he's not very gifted as an artist.
No, he's a sculptor.
Yeah, one day he goes home with a bunch of clay and he wants to sculpt a bust of the waitress that he's got a crush on. Mm-hmm. And somehow his landlady's cat's, like, it's in his wall.
Get into his wall,
and
yeah.
He's trying to cut a hole in the wall to rescue the cat and inadvertently skewers the cat with a knife. By the way, more cat death in horror movies, please. It's not that I hate cats and want them to die, but I get tired of seeing dogs die in every fucking horror movie.
Yeah, no.
So if you gotta kill an animal, mix it up and kill a cat.
Yeah.
So Walter decides that he's going to coat this dead cat with a knife sitting in it with clay and bring it into the club and pose it as a sculpture.
Right.
And it's a huge hit.
It's a big hit.
He's being fawned over so much by the people that he can barely do his job. They're just falling over themselves to heap praise on him. And this new artistic discovery, look, doesn't even really know what he's doing, and he just manages this great work of art.
If this was today, he'd be followed around by TMZ nonstop.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So that's what works for him. Mm-hmm. So almost straight away, it goes to murder for art.
Yeah.
Now, the first woman who he uses for this, they make a point of vilifying her. But at the end of the day, Walter went from a meek, kind of cute, aw shucks guy to a cold-blooded killer. Mm-hmm. A cold-blooded killer. And yeah, the movie wants us to say that woman's a bitch and maybe she kind of deserves something bad to happen to her. But what about the dude who's operating the buzzsaw later in the movie who gets his head cut off by a table saw?
Yeah, I know, yeah. Ooh.
That, first of all, pretty grisly.
That is pretty grisly, even for any time.
We don't see anything implicit, but like...
Well, you know it's there, though.
You'd think, like, if we wanted to still like Walter Paisley, like, he would kill them in a painless way, or he would, like, I don't know, drug them or poison them or something like this. Nope.
No.
He will murder people to make these works of art. Not because he wants to murder people, but because he wants the beatniks to like him.
Yeah, he wants their affection. That's what he's really rooting for.
And we can sort of sympathize with the desire for affection, but I can't justify the murders.
No,
right?
We all want to be liked, but I'm not going to kill people to do it. No.
But a lot of people get over that hill and just love this Walter Paisley character. And for me, I don't know that I'm there. I'm not sure if I understand the cult perspective around him. Like, I'm not sure why everybody loves Walter Paisley so much.
I don't know why either, but I mean, you said that he's references Walter Paisley in other, like, later films.
Yeah.
Maybe, like, as a tribute to that character, because I guess that's maybe the one character that really sort of resonates. I don't know. I mean, the waitress I can understand. I mean, when the buzzsaw, that was maybe kind of where he took a turn. I still maybe found the likability in him, but
it's hard to sympathize with someone who's a mass murderer, right? Like, it's weird. In The Bad Seed, she killed a kid because she wanted his pendant,
right?
And she was evil. And in this movie, he kills a bunch of people because he wants to be accepted and popular. And we kind of give him a pass.
Yeah, well, he does get a pass. He does.
So interesting. It culminates in him eventually being discovered and a mob chasing him to his apartment.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the budget was so cheap that they kind of blew the last scene. The idea was that he was going to hang himself, and he would pour the clay over himself, and the clay would form his last great piece of art.
Which would be him hanging, yeah.
They didn't have the budget to do all of that clay stuff, so they put some fake makeup on him, but it doesn't sell. He doesn't look like his other art pieces. He just looks like Walter Paisley hanging on a rope, and I think that final sting was hurt by its budget.
Which would be Corman's fault then.
That's Corman, yeah, but again, there was gonna they were gonna clear this set, and then they were gonna put up the set for Little Shop of Horrors the next day. There was always the next production.
Right.
It's just, I mean, I think it'd probably be just as surprising to him, the movies that hit and the movies that didn't. And all the films that he's produced and all the films that he's directed, why is this one considered so memorable? I wonder if he would even think so. Like, I get the feeling few filmmakers' favorite film that they've made is the most popular film that they've made.
No.
Like, that's very rare that would be the case. It'd be interesting to hear what Roger Corman considers his best work.
That would be interesting.
I haven't seen all of it, but I guess even though I'm a fan of Bucket of Blood, I'm just here saying I hope this isn't his best work.
Best or favorite?
It is best. I'd like to think he made better films than Bucket of Blood. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
But if this was his best...
Well, I mean, Little Shop of Horrors was a better film, I think.
Yeah? I don't know. I was never been really big on Corman's Little Shop of Horrors. I'm much more on Frank Oz's Little Shop of Horrors, personally. Yeah. I think it works better as a goofy musical than as a straight sort of fantastic horror.
Yeah. Both are good.
They both have their pluses and minuses.
That's just my Slurpee.
Oh, that was the one last thing, the beatniks. I started off with this whole Ned Flanders' parents, you know.
Yep.
Oh, dude, we've tried nothing and we're out of ideas. Exactly. Clap your fingers type of thing.
Rainfall.
Do you think that this is a satire or an indictment of beatnik culture, or do
I
you
would
think this is embracing it?
Well, it might have been embracing back in the day. I think now, looking back, it might be an indictment on it.
Yes.
I
agree. I think at the time when this was being made, those people were fucking cool. And I think watching it now, they're hysterically pretentious.
Yeah.
And I won't lie, that kind of sours the meal a little bit for me, too. It's kind of like if you watch a movie set in the 80s and people start breakdancing, right?
Yeah, like Footloose when all the kids suddenly knew how to breakdance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It kind of pulls you out of it a little bit. And
right.
Different strokes, different folks.
Yeah.
Good enough?
Yeah, good enough. Yeah.
Cape Fear, starring Gregory Peck, Robert Mitchum, Polly Bergen. Cape Fear, the screen's most terrifying war of nerves.
Well, I've seen the worst, the dregs, but you are the lowest. You just put the law in my hands, and I'm going to break your heart with it.
I got a little plan for your wife and kids.
They're never going to forget. Never. Nancy! Tell the operator to call the sheriff's office. Send some men out here fast!
Cape Fear, the nightmare that becomes a shocking reality.
Oh, now, come on.
If you touch me, you'll go back to prison for life.
You want to make a little bet on that?
But you will. I'm not like Nancy. I'm not afraid to testify. I swear it. You've got to believe me. I'm not afraid.
So we're going to talk about the 1962 version of Cape Fear. Full disclosure, I'm much more familiar with the 1992 version of Cape Fear, the Martin Scorsese one.
With De Niro and Nolte,
yeah. I'd seen that one first, and I've seen that quite a lot. I kind of backed into this version of the film. So it's kind of hard for one film not to be colored by the other.
Did you must have known about the first Cape Fear before you saw it?
Yeah, I knew it existed. I knew it was a remake. I knew Robert Mitchum and Gregory Peck were in it, and they showed up in cameos in the remake. But
Walter Balsam.
Yeah,
Martin Balsam.
So, but I'd never actually got around to watching this remake.
Right.
So here we go. I think that because I'm used to the Scorsese version and the fairly extreme version of this, the fact that we're watching this same brutal story through the filter of the early 60s now.
Where it's a bit more tame, right?
They were not allowed to use the word rape.
No, that's right. No,
they were not allowed to use the word. But Robert Mitchum, Max Cady, is a rapist. Okay, he violently assaults, beats, and rapes women, and that's what he was in jail for.
Yep.
And it's interesting watching the script dance around it. It works entirely. The threat is still there, and I think Robert Mitchum is one of the greatest Hollywood villains ever. Period.
Night of the Hunter.
Night of the Hunter is amazing, right?
Yeah.
And he's really good here as well. But I like how much they got away with in that they didn't say it, but they said it implicitly. It kind of reminds me of the 60s Haunting, where there's that very heightened sexual tension between the two female characters that's very implicit in the book, but they just had to nudge it in the film. And the way they nudge it actually makes it kind of pop, you know? In a way that they have to dance around the sexual violence of the film, it kind of makes it creepier. I think that the remake is much more viscerally tense and maybe more nail-bitingly exciting, but there's something chilling about the original. And it has a lot to do with Robert Mitchum.
Oh, very much so, very much so. I think he's more haunting than De Niro was in that. I mean, De Niro did everything. Mitchum didn't. Here's the thing about Mitchum. Mitchum did everything, and he was more intimidating. De Niro does something, and you see a lot of it in his. And I don't think I'm the first person to ever say this, but whenever you see De Niro do something psychotic and he's about to hurt someone, he's got a big smile on his face. Well, no one can see me doing this, but I'm smiling for Larry right now. But good, I'm about to
Here comes the pain.
I'm gonna like take piano wire and hurt you or something. Yeah, because isn't that what he did? He took piano wire and like
the Joe Don Baker character gets his throat garroted, I think is the term.
Yeah.
Yeah, the remake's quite ugly. The original, again, a lot of it is implied, but it's solid there. The other thing that they changed too, and I believe they changed that in the remake, although it's been a while since I've seen the remake. He's a military man in the novel and in the source material, and in the 60s version they didn't want Cady to be from the military because it would be painting a portrait of, somebody who was in the United States military who was less than a perfect patriot.
Oh, okay. Someone who went askew.
Yeah, but part of his, tactical, approach to things, and part of his being super good at fighting and being this violent, dangerous person is that he's a professional trained killer.
Right. That's the other thing too, and that's because of and then they would say that's the U.S. government's fault.
But that's another sort of excised version. It's not here, but you can tell there's something in the background. I think the knife twist that works in both of them very well is the helplessness of somebody who's in a position where they're being stalked and tormented by someone, and they have to follow the rule of law, right?
Yeah.
Max Cady doesn't follow the rule of law, but the victims do. This family, this lawyer has to try to follow the rules, at least initially.
Yeah.
And knowing that they're going to follow rules is what's used against them and what makes their torment all the more frustrating.
Well, Max Cady seems to... He's not... At the beginning, he doesn't seem to break the law, but he comes very close to... He's approaching that line.
Yeah.
I'm not going to cross the line, but I'm just coming very close.
Yeah.
It's like if you had a restraining order of 1,000 feet, well, he'd be 1,100 feet away.
Yeah. And just the way he looks at the wife. And the way he looks at the daughter.
Yeah.
And the way he says, well, I'll give them a night they will never forget. Well, what does that mean?
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Well, they can't say rape and violence,
No,
but I'm pretty sure
that's
it means
what's
rape
implied.
and violence, right? It's
and probably in the end death, because, he wants to destroy everything of Gregory Peck's.
Well, and that's another thing. I would be interested to read the source novel. I know that, like I say, he was a military bloke in that one, but in this version of the film, too, Cady is not killed. Cady goes back to jail, which arguably is a worse fate for Cady, right? He's going to go to jail for the rest of his life now, and he's never going to even have the opportunity for vengeance.
No.
So in a way, that's a better fate for Cady. But again, I don't know if it's because they flinched and they didn't like the idea of the all-American father bashing in this guy's head with a rock, or however they were going to.
Well, they might not have thought of that then. That was obviously Scorsese's version of it, but they might not have thought of that then.
Yeah, but it's different in the Scorsese version because Nick Nolte does try to kill him. but the water takes him before Nolte has the option to do it. So I don't know if it's God, like in the Bad Seed, taking him out. But I like the idea of villains being defeated. Not necessarily killed, but defeated. You know? You're gonna
with no chance.
That's right. You're going to have to go spend some time in your room. And by that, I mean that the rest of your life is going to be a series of 3 or 4 different rooms. And you can just stew on all the evil you've done.
Right.
In a way, that's a worse punishment than being drowned or bludgeoned.
Well, because then he's got to live with that for the rest of his life and think about it.
Yep.
And probably never regret what he did, but try to placate to some people that he did regret his actions for a parole board or whatever, but none to fruition.
It strikes me as an early sort of number in the sort of stalker cinema type too, right? This guy's very motivated. He has a revenge plan, but soon we're going to be seeing into the 70s, a little more in the 80s, and crazily in the 90s, they almost exhausted the genre. The psycho movie, right? Psycho girlfriend, psycho secretary, psycho cop, psycho blah, 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 blah.
Everyone wants to get revenge on someone who advanced themselves.
Yeah.
Like Glenn Close, Fatal Attraction, probably the most famous one.
But I think this is one of the early seeds to that type of movie, you know, and Play Misty for Me, and like all of these sort of, there's a central figure who is doing evil, but they're just circling around the edge of the law enough. They're tormenting you, right?
Yeah.
And that has proved to be a very, very valuable story for Hollywood. It's interesting how much the Max Cady role is way more interesting than the I can't even remember the character, Sam Bowden role. Sam Bowden is the lawyer, the father figure, the protector figure, and we're still very much in those roles. The wife and daughter are largely kind of helpless, it seems, in this world. They're not equipped or to fight themselves or to defend themselves physically at all, nor do they seem to be particularly sharp enough mentally. And that's just the way the time.
That's the way they wrote. Unfortunately, the way they wrote for those the women back in.
They were completely reliant on the man to protect and save them, and that's not questioned in this. If that's going to bug you, it's going to bug you. I just accepted it as that's the time that we were in. You know, in a lot of ways, if it had been too different than that, it would have seemed disingenuous. Right.
It's almost like that in the 1991 version, because I mean Jessica Lange seemed almost like the very helpless housewife, but Juliette Lewis wasn't. When he confronts her at the gym about being, I'm the new director, whatever, De Niro, I'm the new director of the school play, and flirting back and forth, and she's sucking on the finger and all. Obviously, we know what's going on.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's not backing away from him. She's toe to toe with him, and then at the end, I mean, she's the one that had the lighter fluid and
lit him up.
Lit him up. She was actually a strong character. The Jessica Lange wasn't.
Yeah, she was kind of again.
She was like Polly Bergen and the daughter back then, in my opinion.
Yeah, but that was the opportunity that remaking it in the early 90s could prove, because they could make them stronger. They could explore the relationship between Katie and the 14-year-old daughter in a way they just weren't going to touch.
Well, they couldn't touch it then. No.
They weren't going to touch that.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't find Nick Nolte as sympathetic as.
I think consciously so. I think that they were doing, these are two sides of the same coin type of thing here, right? Whereas in the 62 version, there's good and there's evil.
Yeah.
I think in the 90s there's gray and there's darker gray.
Well, because I think Nolte was a court-appointed lawyer, so he...
And he broke the law to get Max in jail.
Yeah.
He did break... He violated his lawyer confidentiality, right? He could have, disproved some testimony that would have exonerated this guy and would have saved him years in a prison cell.
Right.
But because he knew that this was a violent rapist, he couldn't live with it. So he let the guy go in.
Yeah.
So, gray, right?
Yeah.
If your job is to be a defense lawyer, your job is to do everything in your power to defend your client.
Yep.
So he did wrong, Max, Katie. Even Gregory Peck, who plays Sam, said when they were, trying to cast the role, the Max Cady role is the star, is the main character, the better role of the two, right? He's got all the power for 90% of the movie. And as such, they had people like Charlton Heston interested. They had like all sorts of... It's interesting that they settled on Mitchum. Because I think like...
That's not settling.
That should have been your number one choice.
Yeah.
It's just like... It's like when I found out that the Coen brothers actually had someone else in mind to play Leo in Miller's Crossing, and they settled on Albert Finney. How the fuck do you settle on Albert Finney? Like, that's a gift, you guys. Yeah. That's a gift.
I know. It's hard to imagine like some of these roles where they battle through all these other people, and it's like, here we go. This is the person that we've got.
You feel a Hitchcockian definitely influence here, and this is an early 60s movie that's black and white by choice. It was still in that period of films where it wasn't necessarily financially devastating to your movie to release it in black and white. No. It was actually a little bit cheaper because they didn't have to go through the expense of colorizing the film, right?
Right.
So a lot of the times, like the musicals and the Fantasias would be all in color. And your thrillers, your noir, your detective stories were still in black and white.
Which they should be, because, I mean, they just tell them...
It's a choice that's rarely made anymore, but I do enjoy it. I do enjoy it. But at some point, it just came toxic to the audiences. Now it's the type of thing where the black and white film almost has its own appeal because you see it so rarely. But I kind of find that an interesting era where, like, they decide, are we going color? We're going black and white. Are we going, like, forward with the presentation as far as the old school, over-the-top operatic score, or are we going to go reserved? It was like we had old and new Hollywood actually functioning simultaneously for about 5 or 10 years.
Right.
Until the modern age took over. Definitely by the end of the 60s and certainly into the 70s.
Oh, definitely into the 70s. I was going to say, I mean, this is not a Hitchcock film, I should just say.
No, it's the influences there.
Yeah, the influences, but one of the things, I mean, Hitchcock's later films, I mean, towards the end, I mean, his were done in color, and it loses, what you said, I mean, it loses its appeal. He was still trying to get the thriller in there, but it just wasn't as, I'm talking like, I think Torn Curtain and Topaz, it just were not the same.
And which decisions were made for art or commerce? Like, maybe he would have, in his heart, it should have been black and white, but people weren't going to black and white movies. So we'll try it in color. I think it feels like even though it is black and white and even got the big familiar score, which they use the exact same score for the remake, which I kind of like.
Yep.
To tether the two in another way. So it feels simultaneously like a throwback, but it's a more modern movie. Certainly in this group of 6, it feels like a more modern movie than a lot of the other ones to me. And more contemporary in presentation as far as the dynamic shots. I noticed in a lot of the older films we have a lot of long takes, you know. There's a film school thing that you can learn when you're watching a movie and you sort of snap your fingers every time you see a cut, right? So you're watching Michael Bay, right? But the older the movie, I think the fewer cuts you start to see, and the more cinema gets more modernized, the more it becomes this sort of frenetic video thing.
Except P.T. Anderson, he takes long cuts.
Yeah,
he makes his actors work.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
but typically, we go in tighter, we're going smaller, we're micromanaging our films in a way that we couldn't, especially because the digital age. It's such a different era. When you think about the cameras that they would shoot in on would take 2 men to lift and carry. And when you're rolling film through that camera, it's like you're rolling a spool of $20 bills in 1962. Okay? Like, in this digital age where you can shoot all day and it costs nothing, right? Different medium. I think Cape Fear has aged fairly well. I think
it holds up.
Yeah, it would be hard for me to decide which one I prefer. I lean towards the Scorsese, but I honestly think it's because I saw it first. I wonder if I'd seen the 60s version first, if I'd always sort of still have a soft spot for that. But
I mean, it can never be redone, but I mean, if they'd maybe played up more of the what was really going on behind the scenes with what Mitchum had done, if they were able to say, like you said, if they were able to say what his past was, if they could say the word rape, if they were able to do that, then maybe that would have a bit more bite to it. I think Mitchum is a bit more badass than De Niro.
He, like I say,
he's more terrifying.
Ultimate badass.
Yeah.
And he just does it with that lazy look, you know? He just, he could fuck you up if he wanted to. And on a whim, he might just do it.
Yeah, or fall asleep.
To take nothing away from De Niro, his performance is very transformative. Like, he does he commits 100%.
Yeah.
But he does it all with the muscles, with the nose-to-nose, with the yelling and the intimidation. And there's something about the lazy, laid-back, I'm going to fuck you up vibe of Mitchum that I really get behind. Definitely check out Cape Fear.
Oh, definitely check it out, yep.
Audrey Hepburn, the role you're going to remember whenever you're alone.
You behind the door. so long, so they still don't move.
Gloria?
She is blind, and she is alone, with a terrible suspicion growing.
Gloria, I know you're
there. You went right down the list and told me that the doll linked Sam and Mrs. Rote. And now Mrs. Rote's dead. Murdered right next door.
But maybe I was wrong.
That doesn't matter. If you thought that way, the police will think that way.
Wait Until Dark is a 1967 adaptation of a stage play by William Knott. I want to say Frederick Knott, K-N-O-T-T. It's famous for the role played by Audrey Hepburn. She was nominated for an Oscar for it.
Mm-hmm.
And
in a very tough crowd, too, that year for
yeah.
Oscar-nominated ladies.
Indeed. And it's also memorable for Alan Arkin, giving a very modern performance in a movie that maybe isn't super modern.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it split the audiences. Like, they weren't sure what Alan Arkin was doing, playing this heavy Rourke. What was his name? Rote
was his name.
Yeah. They weren't sure what he was doing, and it was equally criticized and praised. And I have to say, watching it now, I don't think Audrey Hepburn gives the performance of the movie. I do think Alan Arkin gives the performance of the movie.
Well, he ends up playing three different people, right? He ends up playing
himself, his dad,
and a brother.
And a brother, I guess, yeah.
I think it's Harry Rote Sr. and Harry Rote Jr.
But the main baddie, it's just Rote, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He is trying to get his hands on this doll full of heroin.
Mm-hmm.
That was being smuggled in. The girl who had the doll saw him looking for her, gave the doll to Audrey Hepburn's husband. It ended up at her flat. Criminals are coming to the flat to try and get the doll. They don't know where the doll is. It's sort of the MacGuffin of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Rote wants those drugs, but moreover is running on drugs. He's high as a fucking kite every time we see him.
Yeah.
And that makes him threatening and dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing arch about his performance. Richard Crenna, which a lot of people will know from the Rambo series,
Rambo,
right?
Yeah.
Still very trapped in that formal 60s, I'm going to deliver my exposition.
Mm-hmm.
Audrey Hepburn, very composed, very theatrical. I'm going to be the world's greatest blind lady.
Yeah, a little over the top, but still, I thought she was still very
She's
effective.
utterly sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because for me, Arkin gives the real performance in a movie full of stage performances.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, he sticks out.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me, in a way, they're completely different movies, but There Will Be Blood. Speaking of Paul Thomas Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Daniel Day-Lewis is so big in the movie. He's so huge in the movie that it's almost like a Muppet is playing the central character and everybody else is just people. Like, he's that much above everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And Rote sticks out in there. So for me, Wait Until Dark has always been more about Alan Arkin than it was about Audrey Hepburn. But I'm, of course, very willing to hear a second opinion.
No. I mean, I thought she gave it. I thought she gave a tour de force in this. I thought she was one. I mean, Rote for me. I mean, they were all good. I mean, Richard Crenna for me was not. I don't want to say not credible, but I mean, you can just never really buy away. He kept coming back, and he just. If I were her, I mean, she has to worry about her own lack of sight and that. But I mean, if there's got to be some instinct, like, why is this Richard Crenna charming to be in, trying to charm his way in there? Maybe help me if you can't, like, why he was...
Richard Crenna and his buddy...
Jack Weston.
Jack Weston. They're the good bad guys.
Right. Pretending to be the police.
They want to get the doll as well.
Yeah.
But they're not interested in killing this blind lady.
Yeah.
They would rather get on her good side through through lying, through conning her, to get access to her apartment. She can't see, they can. They'll find the doll, they'll take the doll. No harm, no foul.
Yeah.
So they're bad dudes, they're dealing in heroin, and they're doing bad things, but they don't want to murder. Whereas you get this feeling like Rote, I don't know that he wants to murder, but he doesn't give a shit.
He doesn't care.
He just doesn't give a shit.
If she falls by the wayside, so be it. I guess my question is, I mean, I never got how Richard Crenna, I can never really understand how he got himself in there and kept coming in there. That's where I'm saying unless I missed something, sneezed during that one particular part or something. Like, I don't know, there was something that I couldn't.
They use different voices and they pretend to be different people in different scenes, and that seemed condescending. Like, blind people aren't stupid, you know. Like, I think if you're used to just dealing with people's voice, you would probably be way more perceptive to someone putting on an accent or faking you. I just believe that. And there's also a huge problem I have with the climax of both the play and the film that we can talk about. I'm not a blind person,
right?
Okay, but she decides she's going to equal the score, right? She's under attack, so she's going to kill all the lights in the apartment.
Yeah.
If you're blind, how do you know all the lights are out in the apartment?
Right, exactly. She might know where they are and just smashes them anyway.
Yeah, but you don't know when you're done or if you're done.
But she also became blind. She wasn't like blind her whole life. She became blind. So
she was adapting to it.
Yeah, so she would have an idea, possibly, if she knew the layout of the apartment.
Yeah, it's just a question that I found myself asking. And I felt like generally I was asking hard questions of this movie at times. I mean, I liked it, but it might be sort of like I was saying about The Bad Seed, almost a more effective stage play than a movie. Like, a lot of the problems that I saw in it, I probably would have dismissed on stage with the presentation and just seeing like a really competent actress play that and have the level of threat to it. This movie has one of the most famous jump scares in cinema history. By the way, the first time Rote comes back from the dead.
Oh, that's, yeah.
When she thinks it's over and she starts stumbling to the room and he dives.
Well, he literally dives, yeah.
He pounces at her. That people shot themselves in the theater at the time. Like, that was huge.
Yeah.
To me, it read like a jump scare, and it was a workable jump scare, but it certainly didn't change my world. You know, it was like, yeah, that was a jump scare, and yeah, I was expecting that. There's no way Rote was going to be done that easily.
But maybe in '67 they hadn't seen that. So.
Yeah, but like the whole idea that she hides behind the fridge door, but when she opens the door, she provides him with light, right? So he comes charging at her. She manages to turn the light off in the fridge, and the final moments play out in total darkness. I think in a stage production, I would be like chewing my nails and be like, oh, that's really cool. In a movie, and maybe this is a personal flaw, I want to see her victorious. I want to see her take Rote out, you know? And as a result, it feels a little bit anticlimactic, you know? The lights come up, and Sam is home, and he hugs her, and the music flourishes, and Rote's just dead. We don't know exactly what happened, but he's dead.
He's just dead, right. Yeah, that's the other thing, too. I mean, the husband made Audrey Hepburn go to her, not the other way around.
Yes.
She's blind and just went through something traumatic. Ephraim Zimbrowitz, step up. Go hug your wife.
Yeah, go to her.
Yeah, don't make her come to you. She's just been hiding behind a fridge all night.
And these criminals aren't the only people taking advantage of this blind lady.
No, the little kid.
A lot of problems would have been solved if that little kid hadn't stolen the doll.
Right, yeah.
And again, she's not... The movie doesn't ask us to criticize her for it. She's just a little girl being a little girl.
Right.
It's an interesting plot point. And it's also interesting because you'd think they'd use that as an opportunity to put the child in peril, which they really never do.
No. Well, Audrey Hepburn did, because she told her to go to Port Authority.
Yeah.
Take this money, go to Port Authority. I don't care if you have to stay there all night.
Yeah.
The kid's, what, 10?
Yeah.
I wouldn't send my daughter to, like, Port Authority in New York. Yeah.
No. It's a different time.
Yeah, well, Port Authority, I've been to Port Authority in New York. It's still pretty scuzzy
Not
in
for 10-year-olds.
Maybe not for a 10-year-old, but for an adult, it's pretty scuzzy in there.
I think it sounds like we're being hard on the movie. It's a well-made movie, and I think, like I said, it's a well-acted movie for its time. It sort of has that arch quality, except for Alan Arkin. And I think the reason that people gave him a hard time when it first came out was because it stood out. To me, I think it kind of stands out in a forward thinking, like he's becoming a modern actor, and he's trapped in a less-than-modern film.
Possibly.
And so that worked for me, but... It's just interesting how times we talked about it with Lifeboat too. At the time Lifeboat came out, the critics were pretty lukewarm on it. Everybody loved this movie. It was considered one of the best movies of the year. And I would say it's a good movie.
It's a good movie.
But if it was one of the best movies of the year, I would maybe tell myself it was kind of a weak year.
Well, yeah, but that's the odd thing, because it wasn't a weak year.
No, it was not. It was not.
You had Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Graduate, Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think all three of those ladies that were in that were up against Audrey Hepburn in that.
But you look at that, like, look at the difference in the filmmaking and the acting in a movie like Bonnie and Clyde, and in a movie like Wait Until Dark.
Yeah, and there was no jump start in Bonnie and Clyde. Faye and Warren Beatty were dead.
Yeah.
When they were dead, they were shot dead.
No, yeah, it
no
didn't happen
jump
in Darkness.
No.
The performances weren't arch.
No.
So, again, we're seeing this shift. And I like watching an old-fashioned movie. It's just interesting that this one's sort of teetering on the edge. It doesn't quite fit perfectly in either category, and that's part of what maybe keeps me at arm's length from the movie.
Okay, so can we get back to Krenner for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Am I missing something with the different voices and like
what was the motivation?
I guess that's what I'm trying.
I think he was trying to get the doll out of there in a non-violent way.
Sure.
Now, why he kept on going like back again, like this guy didn't work.
Why she kept falling? Yeah, why she kept falling for it? Because she could hear when Alan Arkin would come down the stairs as Rote, the initial Rote, and then he came down as Rote Jr. talking about his father.
Yeah.
Well, this is the same man, because he's still got that weird same squeak in his shoes. Because, as you know, if you lose one sense, your other senses enhance.
Well,
and she could hear that weird. And it wasn't because of the floor squeaking; it was because he's got
the way he walked.
The way he walked.
Yeah. Well, the thing with the Richard Crenna thing, she is suspicious, but she never knows. She's always doubting herself.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually she does just call him out.
Yeah.
And he frankly admits it. He says, look, okay, I've been lying to you. We want this doll. Give us this doll, and then we'll go away. Your problem will be solved. Frankly, that's the way they should have opened with that, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. You have something that doesn't belong to you. You don't need to know what it is, but we're going to get it. We're going to get it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
We can just walk into your apartment and take it, or we can fuck your shit up, and then we can walk into your apartment and take it. Now, that would not make for an interesting movie. Right?
Yeah, no, it wouldn't. No.
That would be the common sense solution to their problem.
Mm-hmm.
But they try to dance around it. They try to fleece the blind lady. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't know, this was obviously not written by someone who was blind. So, like I said, how does a blind lady know it's dark? Why does she not understand people's voices? Maybe that's not fair for me to say. I'm not blind. But
right.
I was questioning the credibility while I was watching the movie. And the fact that I was questioning it maybe suggests that there was some problems there.
You know, there actually, now that you think about it, I mean, I think the performance itself, minus the blindness, I thought the fear was there. I guess that would be due to the blindness. One of the things, and now that you've mentioned that I did have a problem with, is the fact that when a couple of, I think it was Richard Crenna who was on the stairs and heard to whatever, and she was going back down the stairs.
She trips?
Well, no, but she was able to avoid his feet. I mean,
right.
if you would know the layout, like if I was blind and in this room, I would know the layout of this room,
right,
where we are right now, which she would do, but you might not know exactly where these feet are, and she was able to perfectly avoid.
Mm-hmm. Like she could hear where his feet were.
Where his still dead feet were, yeah.
Yeah, it's strange.
Mm-hmm.
It's strange, and yeah.
It was a little
I
cheap.
feel like we're being more mean to the movie than it deserves.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some problems. I understand why people like it. I know Audrey Hepburn is this figure.
Yeah, that's hard. We're like bad-mouthing Audrey Hepburn a little bit.
She's beautiful and she's not untalented, but there's something about she's old school Hollywood for me. So she definitely fits into that older niche.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a good actor, but I always see her acting, if that makes sense. Like, good acting choice, Audrey.
Yeah.
But when I'm watching like De Niro and Cape Fear, I don't think good acting choice. I think, oh God, you're scary. Right?
Right.
What I think she taps into and what really services the film is that we sympathize with her and cheer for her, right? Her good is bright and loud, and Rote is so bad. He's like the prototypical evil bad guy. He won't be killed, and he's so bad that he will kill the other bad guys who aren't being bad enough. Right?
Yeah, just to get what he wants, yeah.
He's arguably undimensioned, and I think that Arkin probably threw the drug thing into it to try and give him that dimension.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that he's acting this way is not because he's evil, it's because he's high out of his mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth a look. I think a lot of people might think that this should be the top of the list, and spoilers, it's not the top of the list for me.
Not me
but I wouldn't tell someone don't watch it.
No.
It's interesting.
No, it's very interesting.
So here, classic thrills. I found it to be a tough rank. Like, the bottom was pretty self-explanatory, but the middle, I think, like, on a different day, their rank might have been a little different. Mm-hmm. It's tough. It's tough. And I don't know if I'm wearing it, like, how well the movie's aged, or if I'm just rating it on my general sense of enjoyment. I sort of felt this one out.
It could be because it's a Sunday, and like you said, on a Friday it might be different.
Yeah, but on this particular Sunday, Malcolm, what was your least favorite of these 6 films?
This is not going to be, and it will be my least, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I sound like the Happy Day song. White Zombie would be my least favorite. If I have to see Bela Lugosi grab those fingers again one more time, as though that's going to like control like the slave zombies. No, I didn't like that. I didn't like the making of the film. I didn't like the story.
Right.
Not didn't like it, but it just wasn't.
At least it was short.
It was short, yes. It was short. I guess my next would be The Bad Seed. My next, I guess, 5th, that would be. I mean, the performances were fine. It just seemed to me as though that, like I said, I mean, and this is like, I mean, this is very trivial about it, but at the end, I mean, you have a certain idea of these characters, and to see them, do their presenting of themselves at the end, that kind of bothered me. But I didn't fully buy into that. The mother, whatever her name was again,
right.
The little girl. I mean, obviously a clear sociopath, but I mean, it just seemed like
the mother's tactics were a little questionable.
What's that?
Her tactics were a little questionable.
Yeah. Just, I mean, like, well, my girl can't do anything wrong, and then suddenly.
She did a lot of things really wrong.
Yeah, she did a lot of things really wrong. It just didn't resonate as much to me. I don't know why. It just really didn't. It didn't grab me as much. It didn't grab my attention as much.
Fair enough.
Decent film. I mean, good little performance by the good little actress who. Actually, I think I looked her up. She actually grew up. Do you remember the spinoff from Three's Company, The Ropers?
Oh yeah.
That was Jeffrey Tambor's wife.
No way.
Yeah, I looked her up. Because I reckon that Patty McCormick.
I remember that show existed, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think it was only on it for a year, but yeah, that was his wife. And then my next would be Lifeboat, which would be very good premise. And I mean, you have to do anything for survival, and they wanted to, when that German Nazi captain was called out by Attila the Bankhead, I mean, he wanted to do anything. And I think it was kind of her that really didn't want him gone. I thought she actually kind of made this film and was the, the backbone of the film, the uninformed captain, I guess, so we will, of this lifeboat.
Refreshing that it's not a military figure in the center of this story.
No, but she was a very independent person in life. I mean, I don't think there was much of a stretch in terms of acting and what she had to do. We talked about maybe Audrey Hepburn before there. I don't think there was really anything that Attila the Bankhead was stretching on. But that would be my number 4, just because couple of performances were it was just a bit, maybe a bit pushed. The fellow William Bendix with the gangrene, I mean, I felt for him and that, but I mean, part of it was, I don't know if it was just on him. It was nice to see Hume Cronin, though. That was always refreshing to see Hume Cronin. He was a good old...
handsome fella.
Yeah, good old... No, but he was a good old actor in everything he did.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Bucket of Blood, I liked it. I like Walter Paisley. Is that right, Walter? Yeah. I got a kick out of it. I mean, I myself would not prescribe to be a part of the beatnik generation. Mm-hmm. Maybe more the hippies, but certainly not the beatniks. But no, I quite... It was a surprising, refreshing, different type of premise. I mean, I accidentally killed a cat in the wall. Well, maybe I'll make a sculpture out of myself. And these beatnik people at this...
Embrace it.
Yeah, at this bar will love me. And... be
careful what you want.
Be careful what you want, yeah, because he does turn cold.
Yeah.
Towards the end, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, like you, I mean, I have more sympathy for him still,
right.
Even though the buzzsaw scene was pretty brutal. Yeah,
that definitely crossed the line. Like the first girl he killed, I guess she was shitty to him, and she was a bad person. There was some motivation to it.
Yeah,
this was just a guy he bumped into.
Like, well, he needed another. You know,
he needed another piece. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was number 3 or 2.
That would be my third ranked film. Number 2 would be Wait Until Dark. I do think it's a good tour de force by Miss Audrey Hepburn. I enjoyed her more than Alan Arkin. I know you had Alan Arkin. For some reason I went just shit all over Richard Crenna. So I don't know if that's even a thing. Shit on Richard Crenna, but rest his soul. He's dead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. But anyway,
this review just killed him.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, maybe my review did it. Yeah, sorry there, Mr. Crenna. But no, I mean, I thought it was a great performance by Audrey Hepburn. Very interesting premise behind it. I mean, there were some flaws in the performance. I mean, like we said, I mean, finding out where all the lights was. The idea of it, I mean, finding this doll. And for the rogue character of Alan Arkin, I mean, trying to find this doll, no matter what the cost, whether it comes at Audrey Hepburn's life or not. I mean, he just wants the doll and the heroin.
He'd burn down the city to get that doll if that's what it took. Right?
Yeah. You'd be burning down probably more heroin in 1960s New York, there, buddy. But anyway, that would be my number 2, and obviously number 1 would be the '62 version of Cape Fear. Very sympathetic Gregory Peck, a very haunting Robert Mitchum. Very terrifying. I don't know how he didn't get recognized more by Academy in that. And I mean, I know he was a badass off camera, so maybe that's why. Maybe just because they socially, but he should have been recognized more, even though he.
I mean, I would be guessing, but I think it's because he's always Robert Mitchum. Mm-hmm. The same way, like actors, I love Christopher Walken. He's always Christopher Walken to some degree. You know what I mean?
I guess.
I kind of feel the same way about Mitchum. Yeah, there's dimension. He'll play different characters, but the essential Robert Mitchum is always there, and that's what we go to see. We like that about him. There's different types of actors. Not everybody completely transforms themselves for each particular role.
No.
Instead, there's the approach to, what do I identify in this character?
Well,
how can I bring me to the character instead of the character?
See, I'm the opposite. Sean Connery won an Oscar, but I mean, he's always a Scotsman. He's even a Russian Scotsman at times. I mean. That, again...
But it's a force of personality. For some reason, we like Sean Connery, so he gets a pass, right?
We like Robert Mitchum. I mean, he does... I believe him. I mean, he's very haunting, and he's very... And I mean, like
intimidating.
We said, and very intimidating. Night of the Hunter, he's just...
Bad news.
Yeah, he's very, very...
That's a good list, Malcolm. Shockingly, if not for White Zombie, we would have gone 0 for 6. So again, very different lists. I don't think we're going to fight over this necessarily, but like we said at the top of this, tomorrow if I was to make this list, it might be slightly different. I think I'm okay with my top and bottom, but the middle is tough. Mm-hmm. But yeah, White Zombie is mainly interesting for historic reasons. Okay, it's about Haiti voodoo zombies. It's one of the first major zombie movies. It was a good time to be Bela Lugosi and a good time to be,
You're doing the hand thing with
Bela exactly.
Lugosi. Yeah.
A good time to be that type of figure in films. If you were like the Horror Meister guy, you're going to get lots of work.
Oh, he got tons of work.
I think at the time this was just another movie. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, White Zombie is just another movie. It just happens to be, it got there first for some things. First doesn't always mean best.
No.
If you're crazy about zombies, this is your historic starting point.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, if you're not, I think you can safely skip this one. We're agreed.
Yeah. It's also interesting too that, you just said, that, they talk about, it was only probably 70 years drawn away from it, but you're talking about slavery back in the day too. If you think about the sugarcane owners and all that, and you have these former people that Lugosi took down. Murder was his name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he just essentially took them over as his own slaves. Because slavery was obviously a very terrible thing.
Yeah.
But then the fellow on Haiti, the what was it? The driver. He knew the whole.
He knew the scope. Yeah.
He knew the scope, and yeah. So.
No, it's not terrible, but it's not good enough in this ocean of movies that are available to you. Yeah, see that one.
Mm-hmm.
This will surprise you a little bit, but in 5th place I put Bucket of Blood.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we've come to discover the satirical edge of the movie because maybe originally it wasn't consciously present.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong. I would love to be proven wrong about that. But I think that this is a little bit about beatnik worship going on here when it was made. And I think watching it now, I find the beatniks kind of hilarious and pathetic.
Well, it's dated. It's definitely dated.
Which makes, Walter's desire to be them a little bit less sympathetic.
But that could have been yuppies in the 80s, and that could have been, who's...
Any big social group.
Who's big today that are really, that we just don't like? Republicans? I mean, it could be... I think he can stand the test of time. The beatniks don't.
Yeah. Walter Paisley is sympathetic because we like the idea of the little guy, climbing to the top of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the journey almost always destroys him. And all of that is present in Bucket of Blood. It's fairly cheaply executed. It's got its limited charms. I smiled while I watched it, but it did not blow me away.
It didn't blow me away, but it was just for what it was for a Roger Corman production. That's why I bumped it to number 3 on my list because
That's what I say. I think you're going to be surprised how low it was. All the way in 4th position, I put the completely competently executed Wait Until Dark.
That low.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching it, but again, sort of like in the review, I found myself drawn more towards the flaws than towards the things. I for some reason was picking on the movie. I don't know why, but I was, and maybe it is because it's teetering on the edge between, modern film and classic film.
Mm-hmm.
It's not walking that line comfortably. It's a transition movie.
Well, 1967 was kind of that transition
Absolutely.
Because in the 70s you got into more the independent, the breaking away from the studio people, and this was probably like just right at the end of that.
Yeah.
Because
it feels older than it is in some ways.
Yep. Well, I mean, maybe Audrey Hepburn's sort of classical take on it would...
Something formal about the performances.
Yeah.
I did enjoy it. Like I would recommend people watching everything from the bottom half of the list. Basically everything except for White Zombie. I would say if you're into movies enough to be listening to this podcast, sure, check it out.
Mm-hmm. And it's not anyone else's opinion in here. It's just me that's just shitting on Richard Crenna. So if anybody in his family happens, please don't sue me. Please don't sue me.
I think you're fine. I put The Bad Seed in 3rd place. I can't pretend that it might not have something to do with me seeing the play at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really was a formative experience. Like I sort of saw at a young age what you could do on a stage
mm-hmm.
and how engaging theater can be and how dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So watching the movie reminded me of the play. I think I even said in the review it might even be better served as a play, but it might be artificially high at 3 because I have an affection for the material. I think it's well executed, and like you say, the curtain call at the end of the thing kind of destroys the mood that's been established, but it's just a rote thing of the time.
You see little Patty McCormick as, like I said, I keep saying, this little sociopath who is just going to go about anything, just keep killing if she remains alive.
Yeah.
You see her at the end do that little curtsy, you think, oh, she's just a little spud.
Oh,
yeah. And it's not, I'm off topic here because this is one of the things I wanted to say, but do you remember the old TV show The Fugitive?
Yeah, for sure.
With David Jansen, Barry Morse. They actually had in their contract, because Barry Morse's character, Lieutenant Gerard, was obsessed with finding Kimball, Dr. Kimball, the character. Just obsessed with. They had it written in their contract that Jansen and Barry Morse were not allowed to be seen in public together because they wanted to keep up
the illusion.
So something like, I mean, I know I keep harping on that curtain call thing, but that for me kind of broke it.
Maintain the illusion.
And I mean, it just, I think, the little girl's performance as well. The mother I didn't buy as much. The Eileen Eckert, the mother of the victim, I thought she was great. She was great. The landlady upstairs, I guess you have to have the nosy neighbor landlady kind of thing.
And even the farmhand who knows the score, I liked the take on it.
Oh, I liked his angle of it too. I mean, he didn't, he was just a bit too dim-witted to see. Well, he got outsmarted by the 10-year-old at the end, or however old she was.
It's a compelling story. The idea of an evil child, I think, is something that we will always come back to. So it remains a strong premise.
As long as if they keep doing that, though, I don't want them to, I prefer that filmmakers make it more about the thriller and the psychological. It doesn't have to be blood and gore. It certainly doesn't have to be CGI and effects all over the place. We don't need to see like some person's head be lopped off and do the Matrix circle, slow motion all over the place. The thrillers, like you said before, it get inside your head.
Yeah.
Maybe I like this movie more than 5. I don't know. but
it's the story is told to you. It's almost like instead of seeing the story, someone's sitting you down and telling it to you. I mean, it's not, but that's kind of what it feels like. I was told this story about this broken little girl.
Right.
Anyway, all the way in second place, to keep the list going, don't sit on your phone.
No, I'm not.
All the way in second place, I put the original, not the remake, the original Cape Fear.
Okay.
Love the acting, love the premise, love the story. I think the only thing that maybe knocked it down to number 2 was the fact that they couldn't go full bore with the Katie. It all had to be implied. I certainly got there, and I think they did enough of the job that the movie's completely successful. But they tried to take the teeth out of Mitchum's character. Mitchum is way too scary to not have lots of teeth, but the movie did him no favors in a lot of ways by taking away his military background and taking away the sexual violence in him.
Yeah.
So, great show. Please watch it. Robert Mitchum, awesome.
Yeah, no, and the thing was with my take on that, I mean, I didn't know about the military background per se, maybe, unless I did, and I don't remember it, but that could be more backstory than anything. But I mean, it's unfortunate that they couldn't say what he was really all about. Why was
he such an efficient fighter and killer?
No, not that. But I mean, what were his crimes? Like, what did he do? I mean, it was like back in watching TV in the 50s, and she's with child. She's not pregnant. She's with child.
He was convicted of a despicable crime or something, they say, or a violent crime, but they're never implicit as to what it was.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully the audiences back then, I'm sure they figure it out. Yeah,
they knew they were being denied something because it was forbidden. Because the word rape would just be too upsetting.
Did you ever, it's like when TBS used to air those movies. You've seen the movie Deliverance, right?
Oh yeah.
So if you watch it on like a regular, if you watch the movie as the way it's supposed to be seen, you obviously see what happens in the horrible to Ned Beatty and that. Yeah. But if you watch it on TBS, they went from being chased around by the hillbillies to the next scene they cut, and you see one of the hillbillies with the arrow through his back. I mean, you cut out 7 minutes. Really, the whole point of the movie is the
central conflict point of the movie is gone.
Yeah, and I mean, that's even worse than I think what they were doing with 1962. They couldn't be. It was implied, but they couldn't say what was being said. But.
And they just weren't allowed to do it. I mean, maybe the director, if he could, would be happy to do it. But
I'm sure it would have been. Yeah.
This is the book we're adapting, and this is what we can do, and this is what we can't. Right. And the later we get, the less we can't. There's still shit we're not allowed to do, but I think there's fewer every decade that goes by. Which means in first place, which you ranked surprisingly low to me, was Lifeboat. Again, I was less familiar with Hitchcock than you are, and I was impressed at how dynamic he kept the filming within that one location. I thought the character spread was nice. I really liked Tallulah Bankhead as our lead, because she seems so different, so other from the present, from where we are.
Which also seemed different from all those leading ladies.
This glamorous journalist instead of all these hard military men, and the spectacle actually worked for me. Like I kind of gasped when the rescue boat got exploded, and I think there's a lot of craft to the movie, and I think the cast keeps everything floating.
Yeah.
So that's terrible, but there it is.
Oh no, you had to say it.
I had to say it. There it was. So I put Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat at number 1. But like I said at the top, I think when I sat down to do the list, White Zombie was 6, and Lifeboat was 1. And the middle is kind of the middle.
Yeah, I mean, it could interchange, I guess. Yeah.
So I think even though our lists are quite different, we're pretty close to agreeing.
We're pretty close to agreeing.
Thank you so much for being here, Malcolm. I'm
No.
sorry there are no prizes to give you this time, but
that's okay.
you're welcome to come back. There are more classic movies that need to be reviewed, and there are other options for you. So,
Okay, well, thank you for having me.
And yeah, classic thrills. That was a tough rank and an interesting bunch of movies and some worthy cinema homework. So I made some discoveries this week. I hope you did as well. I'd like to once again thank Malcolm Wilkinson for being on my show. Hopefully we'll be hearing his voice again in the near future. And if you have some feedback for me or Malcolm, please send it to ranknreview@gmail.com. It's ranknreview@gmail.com. And check out the website at ranknreview.ca. Tell that other movie fan in your life about the podcast. And as always, lots of love from your host and random Canadian, Larry Parsons. Thank you so much for supporting my podcast.